When Soviet soldiers pushed through the shattered concrete of Stalingrad, they expected rubble, corpses, and the bitter cold that clung to their uniforms like ice-soaked chains. But what they did not expect, what truly froze them in place, was the unimaginable precision of the German equipment they found buried beneath the ruins. The title you clicked on, Why Soviet Soldiers Panicked After Capturing German Gear, becomes a deeper mystery the more you look at what actually unfolded in those frozen streets. Imagine this scene. A platoon of exhausted Red Army infantry advances through a collapsed factory wall. Their breath clouds in the air, rifles clutched tightly, boots slipping on frozen bricks. As they step inside, they see something gleaming under a blanket of dust, something metallic, strangely clean, almost untouched. A machine that seems out of place in the apocalypse around them. A captured German weapon. But not just any weapon. A weapon they had never seen in their lives. One soldier reaches forward and whispers, "Tovarishi, look at this." And there, lying beside a dead German officer, is a weapon so smooth, so polished, so alien compared to the rough, dirt-clogged Soviet guns they carried. The familiarity of their Mosins and PPSH-41s suddenly felt primitive in comparison. This was the first shock, the first moment of panic. Because Soviet soldiers had been told the enemy was strong, but they had not been told that the enemy's machines were built like instruments of another era. The tension grows when they realize the weapon isn't just Kleenex advanced. It fires faster. It fires smoother. It feels like it belongs in a different century. The fear isn't just about the weapon itself. It's about the realization that their enemy was not simply powerful. Their enemy was engineered for domination. This subtle psychological punch is exactly why Soviet soldiers panicked after capturing German gear isn't just a title. It's a story of discovery, fear, and revelation at the heart of the bloodiest battle humanity has ever seen. One soldier picks up an MG-34 barrel, still warm. Another holds a German map case filled with tools and sight adjustments. Another wipes frost from a brilliantly machined boat carrier. They look at each other, stunned. These weren't just weapons. These were precision instruments, made with a level of industrial craftsmanship the Soviets could barely imagine in the middle of a brutal winter war. And yet, despite the shock, something else begins to grow inside them, a dangerous confidence. Because right there, in the ruins of Stalingrad, they see that even the most perfect machine can break. Even the most flawless design freezes. Even the best German engineering fails under the crushing cold of a Russian winter. It is in that moment they start to understand the truth. The German gear might be superior, but the Soviet spirit was unbreakable. The Red Army soldiers examined the German radio units, perfectly wired, with switches labeled meticulously. They compare them to their own fragile field radios, which often died before reaching the front. How is this still functioning in this cold? One soldier mutters, tapping the metal shell, which still emits a faint, warm hum. He puts his ear to the speaker. There is static but also faint voices. German nearby, planning something. The shock becomes terror as they realize the enemy is close and their technology is still alive. This moment of panic is what shapes the legend. Soviet soldiers, surrounded by death and ice, suddenly holding the enemy's finest machines in their hands. And for the first time, they truly understand the scale of the battle. Stalingrad wasn't just a fight between armies. It was a clash between two worlds, between industrial philosophies, between engineering cultures, between ideas of war itself. But here's the twist. The more German equipment they captured, the more they discovered its weakness. The Panzer tanks, though beautifully engineered, froze in the cold. Their fuel thickened, their brakes stiffened, their gears jammed. Meanwhile, Soviet T-34s, rough, simple, and brutal, kept moving, kept fighting, kept surviving. One Soviet tank mechanic famously said, "German tanks are clocks, beautiful clocks, but clocks are useless in winter." A simple statement, but it captures the heart of the story. Why Soviet soldiers panicked after capturing German gear turns into a psychological transformation. At first, fear, then awe, then realization, and finally confidence. Confidence that the enemy's perfection was too fragile for Russia's unforgiving landscape. Picture this extraordinary moment. A group of Soviet soldiers uncovering a captured German MP-40, still loaded, still warm. They pull the bolt back and test the firing mechanism. Smooth, too smooth. They exchange a look that is both admiration and unease. How do they build such things? One whispers. Another shakes his head. It doesn't matter. We beat them anyway. But the panic wasn't just about the weapons themselves. It was about what these weapons represented. Discipline, industry, resources. Germany had factories that could produce miracle machines. The Soviet soldiers had factories bombed into rubble. Germany had skilled craftsmen. The Soviet Union had conscripts and peasants working around the clock. And yet, it was Germany that was losing. It was Germany that was trapped. It was Germany that could not escape the iron jaws of Stalingrad. This realization changed everything. The panic became power. The shock became fuel. And the captured gear became proof that no machine can defeat a nation's resolve. Imagine a Soviet officer walking through a warehouse filled with captured German optics, finders, binoculars, scope lenses, each one crystal clear. No frost, no cracks, no dust. He picks one up and looks through it. The world becomes sharp, clean, bright. Then he looks around at the soldiers beside him, their uniforms torn, their boots leaking. He feels both admiration and fury. How could the enemy possess such tools and still fail to win? That question is one of the mysteries behind why Soviet soldiers panicked after capturing German gear. The panic wasn't weakness. It was clarity. The realization that Soviet victory wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Because, as the battle dragged on, the Red Army discovered a truth that surprised them as much as the gear itself. German weapons were magnificent, but they were too magnificent, too delicate, too precise. Machines that needed careful maintenance, clean oil, perfect fuel, and stable conditions. And Stalingrad offered none of those things. This is where the psychology flips completely. A Soviet soldier, once terrified by the flawless design of a captured German rifle, later sees a frozen MG-42 jammed with ice. He laughs. Even steel cannot survive here, he says. But we can. This shift from fear to confidence is what makes the Stalingrad story so unique. It is why this battle became a turning point, not only militarily, but mentally. It's why the captured German gear became not just tools, but symbols. Symbols of a war that Germany could no longer win. By the time the Soviets had encircled the Sixth Army, captured warehouses full of pristine equipment, and witnessed elite German units surrender with perfectly maintained weapons still strapped to their chests, the panic was gone, replaced entirely by a powerful understanding. The enemy might have superior machines, but the Soviets had something stronger. Endurance. As the Soviet soldiers marched deeper into the city, their confidence soared. They realized that even the enemy's best equipment could not overcome the brutal cold, the relentless resistance, and the iron will of the defenders. The Red Army began using captured German gear against the Germans themselves. MG-34s mounted in Soviet positions, Panzerfausts fired at retreating columns. German radios used to confuse enemy units. The psychological weight shifted again. Now it was the Germans who panicked when they heard their own weapons firing from Soviet lines. Now it was the Germans who felt the sting of unfamiliarity. Now the perfection of German engineering worked against them as Soviet troops adapted and improvised with terrifying speed. This is the true heart of why Soviet soldiers panicked after capturing German gear. The story is not just one of shock, but one of transformation. The captured equipment became both a warning and a weapon, a reminder of Germany's strength but also a reminder of their vulnerability. And ultimately, it became a symbol of the shift in the entire war. The moment the unstoppable war machine of the Third Reich began to crumble under the weight of its own over-engineering and the ferocious will of the Soviet people. By the time the Red Army looked across the frozen Volga and saw the German lines collapsing, the panic had vanished completely. What remained was determination, victory, and a deep, unbreakable understanding that no amount of engineering brilliance could defeat a nation willing to endure the unimaginable. And as this story unfolds, it becomes clear why this moment still captures curiosity decades later. Why viewers click on a title like Why Soviet soldiers panicked after capturing German gear. It's not just a historical event, it's a human moment. A reminder that war is fought not only with weapons, but with minds, emotions, and the unshakable will to survive. 4 more deep wartime mysteries, hidden battlefield truths, and the stories behind the world's most extraordinary moments. Make sure you visit the channel for the next video.